Hello and welcome. In this interview, we have the pleasure of speaking with an incredible individual. She is a mindset, life, and accountability coach. She calls herself Sarah the Pivoter. It's because what she does, she pivots your life. Now, she has an incredible story, and it is truly one that is one to watch. And at the end of this video, her internet unfortunately lost connection, so we do lose the interview towards the end. It just kind of cuts off, she freezes, but we pick up where we left off and we go over a little bit that we went over in the second part of this series. So I want you to enjoy and empower your life's quest. Cool. So actually, I would just like to know a little bit about you.
Sure. Well, why don't I just start with kind of like the past and how I got to where I'm at? Because I'm assuming that you know a little bit from my profile and things like that. I don't know if you've taken a look at my website yet or not.
I didn't see a link to your website. I looked around, I poked around that, and you have a Facebook page, right? Because I think
the page basically links to my Instagram. There's a Linktree address right on my profile under the intro, and that has all my links in it.
Okay. Yeah, I don't really have Instagram or anything. I only have Facebook. So
on Facebook, it's on Facebook.
Okay.
I'll send it to you now.
Just so I perused a little bit, but I didn't dive.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, so basically I was in aviation for 15 years. I worked in the private jet space. I worked specifically with client relations, client-facing teams. So we were dealing with, VVIPs, billionaires type of clients. And the operational team. So, a lot of my career was very communications focused. It was, I was working in Asia for the last 12 years. So managing multicultural teams, dealing with multicultural flight crew, and then in a very dynamic, fast changing environment. So for me, change is, normal. It's to be expected. And so I have these foundational strategies through that aspect of my career that really allow me to pivot whenever something comes up and not be too fazed by it, not be, oh my God, the world's ending because I didn't leave at 9 o'clock today, and whatever most people kind of get hung up on. But I live this life of in my quest for success, right? I reached all these goals that I had set for myself. I was like, okay, by 35, I'm going to be earning 6 figures and I'll be a director and I'll have a team. And I hit all that by 29. And then I got married at 30. And then I got divorced at 31. And through those kind of years, the 29 to 31 was really this coming back to myself and spiritual awakening starting to take place. And that's, what I'm not sure how much you are into astrology or these things they talk a lot about. I think it's like the Saturn return that's very common around this kind of age. I had some trauma early on in life, and there was PTSD there with my stepfather and some of the things he did with our family, and ended up committing suicide. So I shut down emotionally and was just work, goals, success, money, that was kind of my focus, and anything feeling related or slowing down was that's a waste of time. Don't come at me with this nonsense. So it was really an unraveling of all of that and starting to come into this playful space again, in this expressive space. I used to be a figure skater growing up. So that's where I got my discipline. My goal was to go to the Olympics, and I loved it. It was my life from age 3 till 14. Then I had some knee injuries and back injuries that prevented me from moving forward. And I lost the passion. I just didn't want to do it anymore. And then kind of was listless and well, what do I do with myself? So I've channeled that into aviation. I've always loved the stars. As a little kid, it was my first word. And started to come back into this space where science and logic and philosophy and play can also mix with spirituality and magic. And that's the space that I'm in now. And so it's this invitation to allow people who have been typically very left brain thinking and focused most of their life, because we live in the matrix, right? We're taught that inputs this, here's a formula, and then you get this output. You should want all these things. You should want the house and the car and the summer home, and especially in America, like the standard American dream, right? And just helping people reframe what their worldview is, and to really challenge some long-held assumptions and beliefs, check their stories, so that they can define this for themselves. Because success is not just money and power or fame, it's also health, it's also time, it's how do you show up, right? It's, do you want to live life in black and white, like Pleasantville, and everything's, like perfect? Or do you want to live life out loud and like have color and vibrancy and taste things and this visceral experience? And so I've kind of married in my branding and in my business, pivot point is that exact moment, the juxtaposition of these concepts. And it's like, well, where do I go from here? And we can choose this at any time, but most people only make different choices when they go through a big change, like marriage or divorce or a new job or moving country or a death, or, something major takes place. And then when it happens, their whole world crumbles, because the worldview that they've built is built on sand, right? Or they're so rigidly trying to hold on to this view that they created 5 years ago, the world's changing around them, that they can't surrender to it. So then with this, it's this recognition that we've got pivot points every single moment of every single day. But are we aware of them, right? Like when you wake up, you're somebody's partner, and then you call your mom and you're a son, and then you talk to your friends and you're just a friend. Then maybe you have your own business, you're talking to your team, and then you're on a board, and now you're part of these are your colleagues. So we have all of these different roles that we play, these different versions. How do we learn how to, instead of segregating them, integrate them, so that we can pivot into and out of them with ease, and that there's not this like stark contrast, so that if we're speaking, you're one way, and then, someone else comes in the picture and you're like, oh shit, what do I do? Who do I show up as? And now all of a sudden there's all this energy to try and maintain these different containers, which then eventually cracks, right? So that's kind of the gist of what I do and how I got here. And, in that space in business aviation, there's not much training for teams. It's very lean. It's like a 1 or 2 man band very often, the companies, but they've got smoke and mirrors of, we're this big firm and we've got a whole team, right? And the employees are really doing everything, wearing like 10 hats, and there's no professional development. So these companies grow rapidly. They're getting money, yes, from wealthy individuals, but they're not necessarily using it wisely. They're very reactive. And a lot of that is because of the nature of the environment, right? The boss says, I want to fly somewhere, and then he changes his mind, or she says, like, now we're going here to add 10 more people. That's what they pay for, right? So you become then reactive to everything in your life, as Nicole says, it's the way you do one thing is the way you do all things. So then, once HR teams come in the picture, it's like, okay, they're doing payroll, they're doing insurance, and then they're hiring and firing people. That's it. They don't train you. They don't give you any resources to develop your mind or even become a better professional, like how to communicate, manage a client. So I took it upon myself, because I love to learn. I'm like a big nerd. So I would always take these personal development courses and then transfer the information to my team, because I wanted them to level up so that I could level up, right? We could all go up together, because if I go up and then they're still down here, there's this huge gap, and then shit falls in the crevice and, things go wrong. And so it was this, I want to go there. So in order for me to do that, I know I need to bring them up as well. And I just loved it. It was this experience. Even when I was shut down emotionally, people would come knock on my door and say like, hey, Sarah, do you have 5 minutes? And it would turn into, they told me things they've never told anyone. And it wasn't even about work, but how was that impacting how they showed up at work? And I just have this very safe kind of landing space for them to come into, where they knew I would understand their perspective and not judge them for it, but could then help them, take that step they needed to, or see what they couldn't see. And because I loved it so much, when COVID happened, then I knew my role would probably end at some point because I was in Asia, right? So I was in Hong Kong, and I knew that all these planes flew out of Asia. They were parked in the US, they were parked in Europe or Australia, wherever COVID wasn't at the time. And they weren't flying. My business was to sell them flight plans and weather and fuel. And if you don't fly, I can't sell you those things, right? You don't need them. So I thought, okay, well, should this end because COVID lasts longer than people think it will, what do I actually want to do with myself? Like, how do I want to live life? Because I don't want to do this anymore. I was jaded already for about a year, and started to map out pivot point. And, I started off one-on-one sessions doing corporate training. Then I pivoted into, I was doing Reiki and yoga teaching classes and meditation classes as I got those certifications. Then I realized that that was kind of the shiny object for me. I love those things, and they're an integral part of who I am and how I coach others and how I do things. But I'm also very masculine energy, and I like people who like to move fast. I like to take action, I like rapid results. And so it's less about just sitting in that soft space all the time, but marrying the two together so that there's a soft landing pad for people who like to move fast. And then it's kind of this playground, right? They can experience these things that they're so new to, that they've never had modeled, that they don't understand. They don't even know necessarily how to articulate, yes, that's what I want to do, or that's what I'm looking for. And then they can try things on, like trying clothes on, and then be like, yeah, this style fits me. Okay, cool. Let me go out into the real world and put it into play. Hey, buddy. This is my little bulldog down here.
Yeah. So that's actually
so that's what
really
it
funny. Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
No, I like when you were speaking, I just found like a lot of commonalities, like our actually, like our lines of thought, I think are fairly parallel. And it's funny because it's like some of the things you talked about, how COVID was kind of like a saving grace for you without knowing it. You were sick of the industry that you were in, and COVID was that catalyst that kind of like pushed you over the edge, right?
Absolutely. It was the like push out of the baby bird's nest, like, okay, you can fly now.
Time to fly. Yeah. No, and that's actually really funny. So I was in the military, I was in the Marine Corps, and I worked on F-18s.
Nice.
I did ejection seats and life support systems. Well,
Amazing.
Granted, the planes that you had probably don't have ejection seats because that would probably be bad. But the life support systems, yeah. So it's funny because I know exactly how they operate, really. I mean, how the oxygen comes into the whole system, and how they take air off the engine and make it into cooled air for the cockpit, and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I love that.
So that's kind of cool.
I use that analogy all the time, like with oxygen masks, right? You need to put that on yourself before you help others.
Yeah.
And I love that you used to work. I wanted to be a fighter pilot when I was younger. But I decided not to go military because my eyes weren't good, and I knew that likely I wouldn't get that slot. Yeah. And I also went to the university and saw the ROTC kids and like looked at their uniform. I did Civil Air Patrol. I don't know if you know what that is. And was like, I won't listen to you. So let me go a different route.
There's definitely a lot of rules and regulations, and that's kind of, I kind of live my life a certain way, and I'm also I'm a perpetual learner. Like I don't, I like to learn and learn and learn, and to the point of where I don't ever master anything. I get a lot of information about it, and then I move on. I'm like, oh my God, they're like the next shiny object shows up, and I'm like, teach me. So that's actually a commonality. And my whole Marine Corps career was, honestly, it was kind of a disaster. It was I started off, when I signed up, they put you in a delayed entry program where you sit until you actually go off to boot camp, and I had an 18-year-old kid die in my arms.
Oh goodness.
During that. And I, talk about rough. It's like I had all these generals and stuff sitting in front of me saying if I did anything wrong, they just put me in the brig, and I wasn't even in yet. Like I was nothing. And so that was scary. They found nothing was wrong. Like I did everything right. So there was no worries there. But that was the start of my career. And
and that's
about
big, stressful,
big red flag. Yeah. So, we got into our accident, and I'd always been a physical individual. I was on a semi-pro rugby team. You know, they were a men's league. We were one of the best in the nation. And, you know, I've always been physical. I've played sports throughout my entire life. And then the accident that I had literally stopped that, like killed it. So I'd been living in this high masculine energy my entire life. And the accident was like, you know, it was strange because I got no true internal injuries, you know, my head, but I didn't lose consciousness, so they didn't test for it. So I broke all 4 limbs, multiple bones in each limb. And I was like, pretty much just killed my physicality. So then I had to reinvent myself, you know? So it was like the introduction to the feminine. You know, I got out and, you know, it was like just stressful, like dealing with the TBI and trying to like figure out the cognition problems, the memory problems, you know, formulating sentences, finding words, like all those things, you kind of struggle with them all again. And I guess I got stressed to the point where it was like, and everything changed. And so I've just been on this massive journey trying to learn all this cool new stuff. You know, it just reminds me kind of what you said, like the China virus got to a point where you didn't like your job. It was introduced and you were like, perfect transition time. And then you found like all this new stuff to do. And it's so cool. It's such a blessing too. Like, I just couldn't have lived in that same energy.
Yeah, I mean,
forever.
even Hong Kong was, because Hong Kong is a great city and it's very dynamic. It's very fast paced. It's like New York, right? It's Asia's New York.
Right.
And I loved it. But it was like, so now I actually came to the US last November for a 2-month trip and I've stayed. And so it's like an unintentional global move has just taken place. And so with that, there's been a lot of like reintegration, healing with family, and it made me realize a lot of things. But, you know, the job aspect and career aspect was the kind of last little linchpin that was keeping me stuck, because before that, you know, it was like I made that decision to separate from my husband. I went and did ayahuasca in Peru and like started this whole journey of figuring out who I was and, you know, healing my traumas and things. And so many people are in that space, but they don't know how to ask for it because life is good, right? And everyone is telling you that life is good. Like, good job, you're getting the gold stars from everybody else, but you don't feel the gold star, right? Like you kind of look around and you're like, is this it?
Right. Yeah. That's funny that you say that, because it's like one thing that I've started doing is if you don't celebrate the small wins, the big win is totally unfulfilling.
Absolutely.
And then it's just like, you get that big goal, that next promotion, that whatever. And then you're just like, what's next?
It's just, it's a drug, you know, it's like, you just need more and more and more each time. And then and then if that result is not exactly how you imagined it, you know, like let's say you imagined a red Corvette and you ended up getting a blue Corvette, you'd be like really upset about it because it wasn't red. But is that really something to be upset about? Right. So it's just about understanding what it is you're actually seeking and being able to still accept, you know, the things that happen, because most people look at life, I usually draw it out, but it's like, if I give you a donut, you'd be like, sweet, this is a donut, it's great, it's delicious, right? Like have it with my coffee, have a glass of milk, whatever. You wouldn't be like, Sarah, there's a hole in it. Why'd you give this to me? There's something missing, right? But yet a lot of us look at life that way. And, you know, we all still do it, even you and I and people who are really into this space, it'll still happen. It's just, you know, it's human nature. It's the way we're wired. We're like, for survival tech, you know, the amygdala comes online and we have to put new patterns in place and we have to rewire ourselves so that we enjoy the donut rather than going, oh my God, there's a hole, instead of just enjoying it.
Yeah, no, yeah. Fight or flight. And then also like social conditioning. Like our society is just totally just focused on materialism.
Yes.
And then like I found that when I moved into the spiritual space, it separated that.
Yes.
So, you know, I still make my intentions. There are things that I would love to own land, but I want to put a retreat center on it. I do want things, but the degree in which I want them have changed.
Yes. And the
Yeah.
reason for it is deeper. It's not just
Yeah.
because you've been told by teachers you should want it, or your parents or whatever. It's like there's a layers to it, and you know, you're going to do something with it. It's like, so that what? Why do you want it? And
Yeah.
as we answer that for ourselves more and more, then it becomes clear. Like, you know, sometimes a lot of my clients, they struggle with procrastination, right? And they're like, I just can't seem to do it. I'm like, okay, well, let's look into that. Is this actually something you want to do?
Exactly.
Because procrastination is very often just a symptom that it's not in alignment with what you really desire, but you don't want to admit it to yourself because you're married to this idea.
Mm-hmm.